Hi there and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be flipping this retro waterfall style dresser. I'm going to be painting it black and distressing it to give an old world charm. So let's get started. So this dresser was actually gifted to my mother-in-law by her mother-in-law, which is pretty cool. It's really good quality, solid wood, but that diamond pattern veneer is not hot. So let's fix it up. Right away, I ran into my first obstacle, which was trying to remove this mirror support, and the screw was entirely stripped. I tried cutting it, I tried prying it, and nothing was working. What did work was spinning it around like this to slowly work the screw off. It's not exactly elegant, but goes to show that there's no right answer to these things. You just gotta keep trying and see what's gonna work for you. So I started by removing the hardware. And a pro tip for you that my husband tells me all the time is to always put the screws back where they came from. And he's right. That way they never get lost, they're always the right size. On to my next mistake, which was sanding. You guys, I thought I needed this sanding block, which is a way to get perfectly flat surfaces. But it turns out that 60-year-old furniture does not like to be super flat. All this did was scratch a bunch of lines into the top of my dresser. So instead, I grabbed a soft sanding sponge, which would contour to the curves of this old beauty while still providing the grit I needed to adhere paint. Before sanding the drawers, I used a little bit of wood filler to fill in the holes left from the handles. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do about the handle situation just yet, but I thought it would be best to leave my options open. With my finger on the back of the hole, I squeezed wood filler in from the top. I then used a little piece of cardboard to flatten the surface on top, as well as on the back. I kept going until the hole was filled and let it dry for about an hour. After all my surfaces were sanded, it was time to start cleaning with this TSP alternative. Trisodium phosphates, or TSP, is a great way to degrease furniture before painting. It's really good at getting off any fingerprints or stains that might prevent the paint from holding over time. Fusion's TSP alternative does all that while also being safer for the environment, so I give that a plus. Make sure you take your time around high contact areas like handles, and then give the piece a rinse with some warm water afterwards. Alright, we are done with the dirty stuff and on to the fun stuff. It's time to get painting. I'm using Milk Paint Powder by Homestead House in the color Coal Black. Milk paint is a very old style of painting. It's made from clay, milk protein, lime, and pigment, which means it's 100% natural and environmentally friendly. It dries really quickly and leaves a flat finish. Milk paint comes in a powder that you typically need to mix 50-50 with water. On its own, milk paint gives a beautifully chippy finish, but that's not what I'm going for today, so I'm going to be adding a bonding agent. This will make the milk paint adhere like regular paint, and is typically mixed in at a 1-to-1 ratio with your pre-mixed milk paint. So all in all, we have 1 part powder, 1 part water, to 2 parts bonding agent. Let's clean up and get this show on the road. Because this piece has so many flat surfaces, I will mainly be using this 2-inch synthetic brush. I also have a 1/2-inch round brush that I will be using for smaller details. I'm going to work with the grain of the wood and apply a solid first layer. Not too much, but also not too little. You'll notice right away that this paint was actually going on blue, which I was quite surprised at. I think this was due to the bonding agent, but I kept going with my first layer because I wanted to see how it would dry. We'll come back to this later because I ended up taking on the blue as kind of a theme to this project. I'm working in small sections and going back over my work to smooth out any brush strokes. Milk paint is fairly forgiving, so you don't need to be too fussy, but do make sure you take your time. I'm always guilty of rushing into painting and jumping back and forth between surfaces, but there's really no reason to. Just throw on some music or a podcast, work methodically, and have some fun. Also, another note on mixing paint: to make sure you don't have any inconsistencies between layers, you need to mix enough paint to get you through everything you're going to paint that day, but also know that milk paint does not last very well overnight. When painting the sides or any other inset detail, I find it's really easy to go around the edge first before I fill in the middle. Again, you want to work with the grain of the wood and go back over your work to make sure you're smoothing out any brush strokes. You also want to apply enough paint to get a good layer, but you definitely don't want any dripping. Same thing goes for the drawers, just a nice easy coverage. I did end up painting the trim and sides of the drawers as well. I feel like there's a debate among painters about what's worth painting on the inside and the back, especially in places where a person might not see it. Personally, I'd rather do fewer pieces and do them well. I want this piece to look good even when the drawers are pulled out, and if that means a bit of extra time working through the details, then that's worth it to me. On the mirror assembly, for example, I did end up saving some time by not painting behind where the mirror would be, because once that goes back in, there's no way you would ever see that. For the backside though, I did end up painting it because I know when you walk into the room, you're coming at the side of this dresser, so I knew it would be worth painting just in that odd case somebody saw it. I think it's little details like this that bring your art to the next level. Alright, we are back about 2 hours later for coat number 2. You can see that the blue has disappeared quite a lot and we are left with black with a little bit of the brown wood still poking through. I was happy with that, so I continued on with the same paint and applied my second coat in the same way I applied my first. One thing I wasn't totally happy with was how the wood filler turned out. You could still see indents where the holes were. But that's okay, it's an easy fix. I applied another layer, waited for it to dry, and then sanded it back. Other than that, this layer went on quickly and made a big difference in the coverage of the paint. On to my third and final layer, and this layer is really just a light coverage to hit anything that's still poking through. You can see by now that the black color is taking shape and it looks really matte and pretty. You can see that my paint is going on a bit darker this time. I did go back and mix up a second batch with a bit less bonding agent, and this took away a lot of that blue tone. I still have no idea why this is happening. I decided to roll with it and let the project take on a life of its own, but if you guys have any ideas, leave me a comment down below. Regardless, I do really love the way that this stuff adheres. It's so thin but at the same time opaque. It almost looks like an enamel or glaze on top of the wood. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it is quite different than chalk paint, which creates a really thick layer on top. This is thin and beautiful and keeps the original character of the piece. You'll notice I also haven't sanded at all between layers. I'm not going for a perfectly flat finish, but I'm also finding that this paint is drying really smooth. If I wanted to, I could hit it with a 320 or 400, but I don't think it's necessary. Alright, drum roll please, because it is time to bring this piece to life with some distressing. I am using a coarse grit sandpaper as well as my medium grit sanding sponge to scratch away paint along the edges. This gives your piece a weathered look that adds character, making it seem like it's lived through many years. You want to distress around edges, corners, and details, imitating the natural wear that life might have on the piece. It's best to just let loose here and let your hand take you wherever it wants to go. But at the same time, make sure you step back fairly often to get a look over the whole piece. You want to catch yourself before you go overboard. Once you are done, wipe away any dust with a damp towel or a tack cloth, and you are ready to seal this piece. I used furniture wax to seal this piece, and I think in this case it was the right choice. Furniture wax is typically natural, like beeswax, and you apply it almost like lotion onto the piece, rubbing it in and hydrating the surface. Over time, it will cure and harden, which creates a protective layer. This is nowhere near as hard as something like epoxy or polyurethane will be, but this dresser is going to be sitting in a bedroom, and while the top will get some use, it's an aged and weathered piece anyways. Any additional distressing only adds to the character. So like I've shown here, I'm applying this with a wax brush, and then I'm letting it sit for a couple minutes. You don't need to work very quickly with this, and I will come back with a cloth and rub it in. You want to rub almost to the point of buffing it. This stuff really likes to be polished. It's also important to work in thin layers. If you glob this stuff up, it will not harden well. I actually only applied one layer to the entire piece, but if you were looking for extra protection, if this was going to live somewhere a bit more high traffic, you can come back probably a day or two later to apply a second coat to the top of any surfaces or anywhere that would be much higher touch. One last tip is actually using this wax inside wood sliders. This dresser is old, and though it is really well built and has maintained its shape, the sliders, of course, are very sticky. They don't slide very well, which makes the drawers a bit inaccessible. So I went through and probably did 4 or 5 layers on the sliders, and it made such a difference. They slide and glide really nice now. Otherwise, this is good to go as soon as you have buffed that wax in. You are supposed to give about 30 days typically for this to fully harden. So for this dresser, I'm going to say to not put anything on top of it for a while. But other than that, no odor, no fuss. This stuff is really good to work with. Last but not least, we needed to put back on the hardware. I got my husband to help me drill holes, but if you don't have a husband, don't worry. This is really easy to do on your own. Just take your time, measure it out, and you'll be just fine. We ended up using the same hardware that came with this dresser. We just took off the little plastic shells that were around one side. But this is a really great opportunity to change up the hardware if you want a different look. It can make such a big difference. I also reassembled the mirror, which was just 2 clamps on either side. There is a little piece of felt that sits between the metal clamp and the mirror, and this had degraded over time, so I ended up cutting out a new piece of felt to live here. Alright, the moment we have all been waiting for. So what do you guys think? I love it and am really happy with how it turned out. I think I put a lot of time and care into this. I went slowly and I did things the right way. If you take away anything from this video, I hope it's a sense of purpose. I want you guys to go out there and do this on your own if that's what you're interested in. You don't have to follow my exact steps, you don't have to paint this color, but get out there and do something. I feel that making is a really important part of being human. Use your hands, get messy, try something, and don't be afraid to fail. Things will undoubtedly go wrong, but that's part of the fun, that's part of the challenge, and it's way better having something to show for it than nothing at all. But at the same time, be nice to yourself. Art is not a race and it's not a competition. It needs to be authentic to you. So thanks for watching and thanks for joining me on this journey. If you're looking for more, I do have a website and am hoping to post more videos soon. I'd love nothing more than if we could make this into a community for like-minded makers. I want to show you and inspire you that you can create everything you dream of. So if that sounds good to you, then let's be friends. Alright, until next time, bye.